In a packed congressional hearing, Elon Musk faces off against Representative Jasmine Crockett in a fiery clash over free speech and X's role in spreading hate. Sparks fly as Crockett's sharp questions meet Musk's biting sarcasm. The room buzzed with tension as the House Oversight Committee convened, cameras flashing and whispers rippling through the crowd. At the center of it all sat Elon Musk, billionaire tech titan and owner of X, his trademark smirk barely concealed. Across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett, a rising star from Texas known for her razor-sharp legal mind and unyielding resolve, adjusted her notes with a steely gaze. The hearing was billed as an inquiry into X's content moderation policies, but everyone knew it was more than that. A showdown between two formidable forces, each wielding their own vision of truth and power. The air crackled with anticipation, the stakes impossibly high in a nation grappling with the limits of free speech and the dangers of unchecked misinformation. Crockett wasted no time. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, "your platform has become a breeding ground for hate speech, misinformation, and division. Under your leadership, X has amplified voices that incite violence and erode democracy. How do you justify this?" The question landed like a grenade, and the audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. Musk tilted his head, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Congresswoman," he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension, "I'm not here to play nanny to the internet. X is a platform for open dialogue, where ideas, good, bad, or ugly, duke it out. Censorship is a slippery slope, and I'd rather deal with a little chaos than a sanitized dystopia." His words were met with murmurs from the crowd, some nodding. In agreement, others visibly bristling. Crockett didn't flinch. "Chaos, Mr. Musk? Is that what you call it when lies about elections spread like wildfire, or when racial slurs trend on your platform?" She leaned forward, her voice steady, but laced with fire. "You claim to champion free speech, but what about accountability? What about the real-world harm your hands-off approach enables?" Musk chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that echoed through the chamber. "Harm? The real harm is when people like you decide what's too dangerous to say. You're a lawyer, right? You should know better than to trust power-hungry bureaucrats to play referee." The jab was personal, and it stung. Crockett's eyes narrowed, but she held her composure, her mind already racing toward her next move. The exchange set the tone for a hearing that felt more like a courtroom duel than a policy debate. Crockett, armed with a deep understanding of constitutional law and a passion for justice, pressed Musk on specific failures: bot-driven misinformation campaigns, unmoderated hate groups, and X's role in amplifying divisive rhetoric during recent elections. Each question was a carefully aimed arrow, designed to expose contradictions in Musk's philosophy. But Musk parried with ease, his responses laced with sarcasm and deflections. "You want a perfect platform? Build one yourself," he quipped, at one point drawing scattered laughter from his supporters in the room. To him, Crockett was out of her depth, a politician grandstanding for clout, oblivious to the complexities of running a global platform. Yet Crockett was no ordinary adversary. Her questions grew sharper, her arguments more precise. She cited case law, from Brandenburg versus Ohio to the limits of First Amendment protections, dismantling Musk's blanket defense of free speech with surgical precision. "The Constitution isn't a shield for reckless endangerment," she said, her voice rising. "Your platform isn't a neutral bystander. It's a megaphone, and you're choosing who gets to scream the loudest." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Even Musk's smirk faltered for a moment, though he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with a theatrical sigh. "Nice speech," he said, "but you're still missing the point. Control the narrative, and you control thought. I'm not in the business of playing God." As the first hour drew to a close, the tension was palpable. Crockett had landed blows, exposing cracks in Musk's armor, but he remained defiant, his arrogance unshaken. The public watching live on X was divided. Some hailed Musk as a free speech warrior. Others saw Crockett as a beacon of accountability. The hearing was far from over, and both sides were digging in for a fight that would reverberate far beyond the Capitol. Crockett glanced at her notes, a faint smile playing on her lips. She had a plan, and Musk had no idea what was coming next. The hearing room pulsed with raw energy as Representative Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her eyes locked on Elon Musk. His smug demeanor hadn't wavered, but the faint twitch in his jaw betrayed a flicker of unease. Crockett's opening salvo had shaken him, and now she was ready to escalate. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice calm but piercing, "you've dodged my questions about accountability, so let's get specific. In 2024, X was cited in federal reports for amplifying disinformation during the presidential election. Your response was to call it free speech. Do you believe lies about voter fraud are protected speech, or are you just profiting from the chaos?" The question was a dagger, and the room held its breath. Musk's smirk returned, but it was tighter now, less effortless. "Congresswoman, you're cherry-picking," he said, his tone sharp with mockery. "X doesn't amplify anything. It's a mirror of what people say. If you don't like the reflection, maybe the problem's not the platform. And let's not pretend politicians don't spread their own lies. I don't see you grilling your colleagues." The jab was calculated, meant to deflect and provoke, and it worked. Gasps rippled through the audience, and a few committee members shifted uncomfortably. Crockett's expression hardened, but she didn't take the bait. Instead, she flipped to a new page in her notes, her movements deliberate, almost predatory. "Let's talk about your mirror, then," she said, her voice steady but laced with contempt. "X's algorithm isn't neutral. It boosts content based on engagement, and hate speech, lies, they get clicks. You're not just reflecting society, you're shaping it. Your own engineers admitted this in leaked documents. Care. To explain?" The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Musk's eyes narrowed, and for the first time his composure cracked. "Leaked documents?" he scoffed, but his voice carried a hint of strain. "Sounds like a fishing expedition. You've got no proof, just headlines. I run a business, not a courtroom." His sarcasm was still there, but it felt forced, a shield. Against the growing pressure, Crockett pressed her advantage. "No proof? Let's try facts. In 2023, X's ad revenue dropped 30% after brands pulled out, citing unchecked hate speech. You tweeted it was their loss, but your shareholders didn't agree. Are you prioritizing ideology over responsibility, or is this just bad business?" The question was brutal, tying Musk's personal brand to X's failures. The crowd murmured, and Musk's fingers drummed on the table, a rare sign of agitation. "You're preaching, not questioning," he shot back. "Businesses come and go. X is about ideas, not appeasing corporate snowflakes. If you want to talk responsibility, look at Congress's approval ratings, lower than mine, last I checked." The quip drew chuckles from his supporters, but it couldn't mask the fact that Crockett was gaining ground. She shifted gears, her voice dropping to a chilling calm. "Let's talk about your ideas then. You've said free speech is absolute, but you've banned accounts for criticizing you personally. Selective principles, Mr. Musk?" The accusation was a grenade, and the room erupted in whispers. Musk's face reddened, his sarcasm giving way to barely concealed anger. "That's a lie," he snapped, leaning forward. "I don't ban people for criticism. Show me the receipts, or stop wasting my time." But Crockett was ready. She slid a stack of papers across the table, printouts of deleted posts and suspended accounts, all time-stamped. "These are from ex-users who questioned your leadership. Coincidence or censorship?" she asked, her tone daring him to lie. Musk stared at the papers, his silence deafening. For a moment, the untouchable billionaire looked cornered, his quick wit failing him. "I'll need to review those," he said finally, his voice clipped. "But let's be real. Running a platform isn't black and white. You wouldn't understand the tech, so why pretend?" The insult was a desperate swing, and it landed poorly. Crockett's smile was razor-thin. "I understand enough to know hypocrisy when I see it," she said. "And so does the American public." As the second hour ticked by, the hearing was a pressure cooker. Crockett's relentless questions had exposed Musk's contradictions, but he refused to yield, doubling down with biting sarcasm and deflections. The live X feed exploded with reactions. Some called Crockett a hero, others branded her a bully. Musk's supporters rallied, but cracks were forming in his invincible image. Crockett glanced at her watch, her mind already on her next move. She hadn't played her trump card yet, and Musk was about to learn just how deep her preparation ran. The hearing room was a crucible, the air thick with the weight of unspoken challenges. Representative Jasmine Crockett's calculated pause hung over the chamber, her eyes never leaving Elon Musk. He sat rigid, his earlier smirk replaced by a taut expression, the stack of incriminating papers still untouched before him. Crockett's probing had chipped away at his facade, and the murmurs from the audience signaled a shift. Musk's unshakable aura was fraying, but he wasn't done fighting. With a slow, deliberate lean forward, he fixed Crockett with a stare. "You're good at theater, I'll give you that," he said, his voice low and edged with venom. "But this isn't a courtroom and I'm not on trial. So what's next? More gotcha papers?" The taunt was a dare, but Crockett's faint smile suggested she was ready to meet it. "Mr. Musk," she began, her tone measured but carrying a quiet menace, "you've dismissed accountability as censorship, but let's talk about your choices. In 2024, X's algorithm boosted a conspiracy theory about election tampering that reached 50 million users in 48 hours. Your response was to retweet it with a winking emoji. Is that leadership or recklessness?" The accusation landed like a sledgehammer, and the room buzzed with shock. Musk's jaw clenched, his fingers curling into a fist. "You're twisting things," he shot back, his sarcasm now laced with defensiveness. "I retweet to spark discussion, not to endorse. Maybe you don't get how X works, but users aren't idiots. They can think for themselves." His words were sharp, but they lacked the effortless swagger of earlier, betraying a man under siege. Crockett didn't blink. "Users can think, but your algorithm decides what they see," she countered, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You've admitted to tweaking it yourself, overriding your own engineers. So tell us, Mr. Musk, when you amplified that lie, were you sparking discussion or pouring fuel on a fire?" The question was a trap, and Musk knew it. His eyes flicked to the committee members, some of whom now avoided his gaze. "I don't micromanage code," he said, his tone clipped. "And I don't answer to outrage mobs. You want to talk fires? Look at the riots your party's rhetoric has fueled." The attack was personal, a low blow aimed at Crockett's political allies, and it drew sharp gasps from the crowd. But Crockett was unshaken, her focus laser-like. She reached for a new document, sliding it forward with deliberate calm. "Let's stay on topic," she said. "This is an internal X memo, dated last year, where you personally approved changes to prioritize high-impact content. That same week, posts inciting violence against immigrants spiked. Coincidence? The memo was a bombshell, and the room erupted in whispers. Musk's face darkened, his voice dropping to a growl. "You're leaking private documents now? That's a cheap shot even for you. I make decisions to keep X alive, not to play morality police. If you want perfection, go regulate fairy tales." His defiance was fierce, but the strain was evident. He was losing the room, and he knew it. Crockett seized the moment, her voice now a blend of steel and sorrow. "This isn't about perfection, Mr. Musk. It's about responsibility. Your platform has blood on its hands. Real people hurt because, you chose clicks over conscience. You call yourself a visionary, but what's your vision? A world where truth drowns in noise? The words cut deep, and for a fleeting moment Musk's mask slipped, his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. But he recovered quickly, leaning back, with a forced laugh. You're preaching again, Congresswoman? Truth? Your version of it? I'd rather let the chaos sort it out than trust you to play judge. The retort was biting, but it couldn't undo the damage. Crockett's questions were landing, and the public was watching. The X feed was a firestorm, with hashtags trending for both Crockett and Musk. Supporters clashed, some praising Crockett's courage, others decrying her as a power-hungry censor. Musk's loyalists rallied, but the tide of skepticism was growing, fueled by Crockett's relentless evidence. She glanced at her notes, her mind racing. The memo was just the beginning. She had more, and it was explosive. As the third hour loomed, the hearing was a powder keg, and Crockett was holding the match. Musk's arrogance was still intact, but it was brittle now, and she was ready to break it. The hearing room crackled with barely contained chaos, the weight of Crockett's last strike still reverberating. Representative Jasmine Crockett stood poised, her gaze unflinching as she held the damning memo in her hand, its implications hanging like a guillotine over Elon Musk. His defiance flickered, his eyes darting briefly to the document before snapping back to her. The X feed was a war zone, with users dissecting every word, but in the chamber it was just the two of them, locked in a battle of wills. Musk's voice broke the silence, sharp and laced with mockery. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Digging up memos, playing prosecutor, but you're still missing the big picture. X is freedom, and you're scared of it. The taunt was meant to rattle her, but Crockett's expression didn't waver. She was ready to ignite the powder keg. Freedom. Mr. Musk? She said, her voice a blade, slicing through his bravado. Let's test that. In 2024, X hosted a coordinated campaign targeting minority voters with false polling locations. It reached millions before your team acted, 48 hours late. You call that freedom or negligence? The accusation was a gut punch, and the room gasped audibly. Musk's face tightened, his fingers gripping the table's edge. You're exaggerating, he snapped, his sarcasm thinning. We can't catch every bad actor in real time. You want a nanny state? Move to China. The jab was desperate, and it landed flat, the audience sensing his footing slip. Crockett's eyes gleamed. She had him on the ropes. She pressed forward, relentless. Negligence has consequences, Mr. Musk. That campaign suppressed votes. Real people were disenfranchised. Your platform didn't just host it. Your algorithm pushed it. Explain why you prioritized engagement over democracy. Her words were a scalpel, exposing the moral rot beneath Musk's ideology. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. Don't lecture me on democracy. X gives everyone a voice, not just the elites you cozy up to. You want control, not fairness. Admit it. The accusation was a wild swing, but Crockett was unshaken, her preparation a fortress. She slid another document across the table, this one thicker, its pages marked with highlighted lines. This is a deposition from one of your former moderators, she said, her tone icy. They testify you ignored their warnings about that campaign, calling it noise. You overruled their takedown request. Why? The revelation was seismic, and the room erupted in murmurs. Musk's eyes widened, a rare flash of panic crossing his face before he masked it with a forced laugh. Deposition! You're scraping the barrel now. Moderators whine. It's part of the job. I don't babysit their feelings, and I don't bow to your witch hunt. But his voice betrayed him. The sarcasm hollow, the defiance brittle. The committee members exchanged glances, some visibly stunned by the evidence piling up. Crockett's voice rose, carrying the weight of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. This isn't about feelings, Mr. Musk. It's about choices. You chose to ignore warnings, to amplify lies, to let harm spread. You're not a bystander. You're complicit. How do you sleep at night? The question was a dagger, and it struck deep. Musk's face flushed, his composure unraveling. Complicit? He spat, his voice rising. You're the one twisting facts to score points. X is a tool, not a dictator. If you don't like it, log off. The outburst was raw, unguarded, and it cost him. The audience shifted, the tide turning as Crockett's relentless precision exposed his contradictions. The X feed was ablaze, with Crockett's supporters hailing her as a legal genius, while Musk's defenders scrambled to spin his unraveling. Performance. Hashtags clashed, but the momentum was with Crockett, her evidence undeniable. She leaned back, her eyes never leaving Musk, who now sat rigid, his hands clenched. The hearing was a battlefield, and she was winning. But she wasn't done. Her next move was already forming, a final blow designed to shatter Musk's defenses. As the fourth hour approached, the room braced for impact, sensing the climax of this brutal confrontation looming. The hearing room was a pressure cooker, the air heavy with the fallout of Crockett's relentless assault. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat composed, her gaze a laser fixed on Elon Musk, whose rigid posture and clenched fists betrayed a man cornered. The X feed was a frenzy, Crockett's name trending as a symbol of unyielding justice, while Musk's supporters struggled to counter the narrative of his unraveling. His sarcasm, once a weapon, now felt like a crutch, and the audience sensed blood in the water. Crockett's evidence had dismantled his defenses, but her final blow was yet to come. She leaned forward, her voice a quiet storm. "Mr. Musk," she said, "you've called X a beacon of truth. But let's examine that. Last year, you personally intervened to reinstate an account spreading neo-Nazi propaganda. Why?" The question was a thunderbolt, and the room froze. Musk's eyes flashed with fury, his voice a low growl. "You're lying," he said, but the tremor in his tone betrayed him. "I don't play favorites, and I don't reinstate garbage. Show me proof, or this is just slander." The challenge was desperate, a last stand, but Crockett was ready. She produced a single sheet of paper, a screenshot of an internal X email with Musk's signature. "This is your directive, ordering the account's restoration, citing free speech." The same account later incited a hate crime. Care to explain? The evidence was devastating, and the crowd erupted in gasps. Musk's face paled, his hands trembling as he grabbed the paper. "This is out of context," he stammered, his sarcasm gone, replaced by raw anger. "You don't understand the stakes. I'm fighting for open discourse, not hate." But the words rang hollow, his credibility in tatters. Crockett's voice, cut through the chaos, steady and unforgiving. "You're fighting for chaos, Mr. Musk. You reinstated that account knowing its history. You chose ideology over lives. How is that not complicity?" The accusation was a blade, and it struck deep. Musk's eyes darted to the committee, seeking an ally, but found none. "Complicity," he spat, leaning forward. "You're the one weaponizing this hearing to silence dissent. You want power, not justice. X is the last bastion of free thought, and you're terrified of it." The outburst was fierce, but it lacked conviction, a shadow of his earlier bravado. Crockett's smile was cold, her control absolute. "Terrified? No, Mr. Musk. I'm holding you accountable. The First Amendment doesn't protect incitement, and you're not above the law." She shifted gears, her voice rising with righteous fury. "Let's talk about your bastion. X's own data shows hate speech surged 40% under your leadership. You've slashed moderation teams, ignored court orders, and profited from division. Is this your vision of freedom?" The questions were relentless, each one a hammer blow. Musk's face twisted, his voice rising to a shout. "You're cherry-picking stats. X is a platform, not a publisher. I don't control what people say, and I won't. You want a sanitized internet? Go build it!" The outburst drew scattered cheers from his supporters, but the room's mood had shifted. Crockett's evidence was undeniable, her logic airtight. She leaned back, letting the silence amplify her point. The X feed was a wildfire, with Crockett's supporters chanting her name and Musk's defenders floundering. Memes of Musk's faltering composure spread like lightning, while Crockett's poised takedowns were hailed as masterstrokes. The committee members, once neutral, now leaned forward, their faces grim. Crockett's voice softened, but its edge remained. "Mr. Musk, you've built an empire on disruption, but disruption isn't progress when it harms. You're not a martyr. You're a businessman who's lost his way. The public deserves better." The words were a quiet condemnation, and they landed like a final verdict. Musk stared at her, his jaw tight, his silence a concession. As the fifth hour loomed, the hearing was a crucible of raw emotion. Crockett had stripped Musk bare, exposing the flaws in his philosophy and the cost of his choices. The room buzzed with anticipation, sensing the endgame. Crockett glanced at her notes, her final strategy crystallizing. She had one last card to play, and it would redefine the battle. The hearing room was a cauldron of tension, every eye fixed on Representative Jasmine Crockett as she prepared her final strike. Elon Musk sat opposite, his once unshakable confidence reduced to a brittle shell, his hands gripping the table as if to anchor himself. The X feed was a maelstrom, with Crockett's supporters crowning her a legal titan and Musk's defenders clinging to dwindling hope. Crockett's relentless evidence had exposed Musk's contradictions, and the air crackled with the promise of a decisive end. She straightened her notes, her voice rising with a quiet, unyielding power. "Mr. Musk," she began, "you've painted yourself as a champion of free speech, but your actions tell a different story. Let's end this with the truth." The room leaned in, sensing the climax of a battle that had gripped the nation. Crockett's tone was deliberate, each word a carefully placed stone. In 2024, X was subpoenaed for failing to comply with a federal order to remove terrorist recruitment content. You defied the court, calling it government overreach. That content stayed up for weeks, radicalizing vulnerable users. Why did you prioritize your ego over public safety? The accusation was a bombshell, and the chamber erupted in gasps. Musk's face flushed, his voice a hoarse rasp. "That's a distortion," he said, his eyes blazing. "I fought that, order to protect free speech, not to enable terror. You're spinning lies to bury me." But his defiance was hollow, the weight of Crockett's evidence crushing his narrative. She slid a final document forward, a court transcript, its pages marked with Musk's own words defying the judge. "This is you, Mr. Musk, admitting you ignored the order," she said, her voice steady but searing. "Your platform became a tool for harm because you chose defiance over duty. You're not a rebel. You're reckless." The words were a verdict, and Musk's silence was deafening. His eyes darted to the transcript, then back to Crockett, his bravado gone. "You don't get it," he muttered, almost to himself. "Control the platform, and you control minds. I won't let you win." The plea was raw, but it fell flat, the room unmoved by his unraveling defiance. Crockett's gaze softened, not with pity, but with the certainty of victory. "This isn't about winning, Mr. Musk. It's about responsibility. You've failed the public, and they see it now." The committee chair signaled the end of questioning, but Crockett had one final statement. She rose, her voice ringing with conviction. "Mr. Musk, you've built a platform that shapes our world, but with power comes accountability. The First Amendment isn't a shield for chaos, it's a balance. Today, we've shown that balance matters, The American people deserve a platform that uplifts truth, not division. The room burst into applause, a wave of approval that drowned out the scattered boos from Musk's supporters. Musk sat motionless, his face a mask of defeat, his silence an admission of the battle lost. As the hearing adjourned, the fallout was immediate. The X feed exploded with praise for Crockett, her name a beacon of hope for those demanding accountability. News outlets hailed her as a legal genius, her meticulous preparation and unyielding resolve redefining the debate over tech's role in democracy. Musk's reputation, once untouchable, was battered, his philosophy exposed as flawed and self-serving. He left the chamber without a word, his head bowed, the weight of public scrutiny heavy on his shoulders. Crockett, surrounded by allies, stood tall, her triumph not in gloating, but in the clarity she'd brought to a fractured discourse. In the days that followed, the hearing sparked a national reckoning. Lawmakers proposed bipartisan reforms to regulate tech platforms, balancing free speech with accountability. X faced mounting pressure to overhaul its algorithms, and Musk, chastened, announced a review of content policies, a reluctant nod to the pressure Crockett had unleashed. The public, once divided, found common ground in demanding better from those who shaped their information. Crockett's victory was not just personal but transformative, a reminder that truth, wielded with precision, could shift the tides of power. The battle was over, and democracy, bruised but resilient, stood stronger for it.